welcome to the newsroom. Breaking this hour, Hamas has said that it will hand over the remains of 4 Israeli hostages on Monday under the Gaza ceasefire agreement under phase 1 of the Gaza ceasefire deal. Hamas has said that the 20 living Israeli hostages in exchange for nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners earlier today. The Hostages and Missing Families Forum is calling for the immediate suspension of all agreement implementation until every deceased hostage is returned from Gaza. In a separate update, Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz says the releasing only 4 bodies today would be a failure by Hamas to meet its commitments. Meanwhile, the Israeli military said the International Red Cross was on its way to the meeting point in the south of Gaza to receive several coffins with the bodies of the hostages. And it was prepared to receive additional coffins expected to be transferred to the Red Cross as well. Now joining us on the telecast is my colleague and correspondent Rema Hans. Rema, thank you for joining us. What can you tell us more about the hostage deal coming into effect and now the raising concerns over the bodies and the handover of the bodies of the hostages?
Yes, Asuma, it's indeed historic that war that has been going on for 2 years is almost coming to an end, with, as you mentioned, 20 hostages now back in Israel and over 20 Palestinian prisoners now returning back to Gaza, and have both the parties, both the hostages as well as the Palestinian prisoners, they have all reunited with their families. But now, yes, the raising concern is over the bodies of the hostages that have not yet made it back to Israel. And yes, earlier Hamas had mentioned that they will be releasing the 4 bodies of the hostages today, and now we are learning that they have been now transferred to Red Cross. We have the names of the hostages right here who have been transferred to the Red Cross. There are altogether, to tell our viewers, there are altogether 28 bodies, and out of which 4 have already made it back. The hostages are namely Guy Eliuz, Yossi Sharabi, Bipin Joshi and Daniel Perez. The bodies of these 4 hostages are now safely back in Israel, but the question is, what about the rest of the bodies? And the families from the forum are constantly demanding that there can't be further negotiations with Hamas on this, and they will keep demanding the release of the bodies of the hostages until and unless it's made it back to Israel. There will be protests that will continue in Israel. The families are constantly in touch with the government of Israel, but IDF has not yet confirmed on to what will be the next step, and what will be the steps taken by Hamas. A Hamas official also earlier mentioned that because of the destruction in Gaza, they have not been able to find the bodies of the hostages. This has not been verified by IDF yet, and not to mention, as the Egypt summit is taking place parallelly, the Trump and the Middle East leaders, they are likely to discuss the Hamas disarmament, humanitarian aid that will enter into Gaza once there's still, as I mentioned, this the tension over the release of the bodies of the hostages. The reconstruction plan in Gaza will also be taking place. Deployment of international security forces in Gaza will also be part of the transition phase. And of course, we'll soon know, and we'll find out whether the bodies of and how many bodies will actually make it back to Israel. Over to you, Asuma.
Thank you, Rema Hans, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for another news. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has landed in Egypt and held a media interaction alongside Egyptian President El-Sisi. President Trump is co-chairing the summit with the Egyptian president as he welcomed the leaders at the summit venue. President Trump has met Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas at the summit. World leaders attending the summit include French President Emmanuel Macron, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, along with other leaders. The summit primarily focuses on securing and implementing the multi-phase peace agreement between Israel and Hamas. One of the key areas to be discussed is Gaza's future governance, as associates close to Hamas have already stated that Hamas would not be part of the transition phase of the governance. The summit will also discuss the issue of Hamas disarmament and the deployment of an international security force. Moving on, the U.S. government shutdown has entered its third week today, with Congress still gridlocked over spending and no resolution in sight. The crisis has already cost thousands of jobs and with hundreds of thousands of federal employees on enforced leave. President Donald Trump is following through on his threats to cut the workforce in an effort to pressure Democrats to agree to Republican funding demands. President Donald Trump has warned that if Democrats continue to refuse support for a House-passed resolution to fund the government through late November, it could lead to mass layoffs targeting workers deemed aligned with the opposition party. The impact of the shutdown is becoming more visible as about 1.3 million active duty military personnel are set to miss their first paycheck this Wednesday. In addition, Pentagon officials have been forced to divert $8 billion in research and development funding, and airports are experiencing increasing delays. Transportation Security Administration workers have been calling in sick instead of working without pay, further disrupting travel across the country. In Mexico, according to government officials, torrential rains that has hit Mexico last week has left at least 64 people dead and 64 missing. The heavy downpours triggered landslides, caused rivers to overflow, and cut power in several regions. Mexican authorities have deployed thousands of personnel to assist with evacuations, cleanup efforts, and monitoring the hardest hit areas in Gulf Coast as well as central states in Mexico. Veracruz and Hidalgo were the worst affected, with Veracruz reporting 29 deaths and 18 people missing, while Hidalgo recorded 21 deaths and 43 missing people. While power outages affected 5 states, electricity has been largely restored. The storm's impact has left a massive toll on infrastructure and authorities on recovery efforts. There's a political crisis going on in Africa. Madagascar's president Andry Rajoelina has left the country after weeks of youth protests left the African leader increasingly isolated. As per reports, the leader flew out of the country on a French military aircraft. Demonstrations erupted on 25th September over water and power shortages, but have escalated into an uprising over broader grievances. It was taking charge of the military and appointed a new military chief on Monday. A faction of the paramilitary gendarmerie supporting the protests also took control of the gendarmerie at a formal ceremony in the presence of senior government officials. The protests have spiraled into the most serious challenge to Rajoelina's rule since his re-election in 2023. Hear the general sentiment of the people in Madagascar on Rajoelina.
La création de Rajoel était un acte d'ingérence de la France vis-à-vis de Madagascar. Pourquoi? Eh ben parce que c'était pas un coup d'État, c'était juste une un appel du peuple, un appel pour, comment dire, une liberté d'expression.
Après ce qu'il a fait, je pense qu'il est préférable pour lui de guerpir, quitter Madagascar. Mais on ne va pas le laisser partir comme ça. Il faut qu'il rende compte.
Si la France est vraiment impliquée dedans, normalement c'est injustifié parce que là, on a encore ici besoin de lui pour parler de sa décision.
Now, a military has appointed a new army chief. On Monday, a faction of the paramilitary gendarmerie supporting the protests also took control of the gendarmerie at a formal ceremony in the presence of senior government officials in Madagascar. Now, the protests have spiraled into the most serious challenge to Rajoelina's rule since his re-election in 2023. Now, joining us once again in this telecast is my colleague and correspondent, Rema Hans. Rema, thank you for joining us again. Now, what can you tell us about what has been transpiring in Madagascar?
Yes, Asuma, as you rightly mentioned, there are massive protests, and this has been going on since September 25th. And this is a youth-led protest that has taken place in Madagascar, which has now turned violent and has forced the president to fly away from Madagascar. And we are learning that the allies of President Rajoelina have also left Madagascar, and he was actually scheduled to address the nation around in the next 10-15 minutes, but the soldiers have threatened to take over the state media headquarters in Madagascar, which will now delay the president's address. However, in his absence, the CPAT, which is a rather powerful military in Madagascar, is successfully running the government and have ensured that there will be peaceful protests now, and they have taken control of the security forces and they are now celebrating the president's removal and that he's left Madagascar, and some of them are now demanding the resignation of Rajoelina. Now, to tell our viewers, Asuma, the reason why the protest also escalated recently is because of the ongoing hardships that's faced by the people of Madagascar. They have also mentioned that there's a lot of intervention from French leaders, and there have been protests against the political instability, economic hardships, as I mentioned, and corruption in the region. So now the fate of Madagascar is completely in the hands of the military, and there's also reports of a coup that the president has warned that there could be a coup in Madagascar in the upcoming hours, and he's set to address the nation shortly. And before fleeing Madagascar, he in fact released a couple of prisoners who were long in detention. There were about 8 political prisoners that President Andre has released before leaving the country.
With that, I would like to thank Rema Hans for joining us and sharing that insight. Now, moving on to Europe, at least 66 people were injured after 2 trains collided in eastern Slovakia, derailing an engine and a carriage, according to police and emergency medical services. The collision occurred just after 10 a.m. local time near a tunnel by the village of Jablonov and Terneu, about 55 kilometers west of the city of Košice. Authorities have said that 16 people sustained moderate or serious injuries, while around 50 others were lightly injured. No fatalities have been reported so far. Police footage showed wreckage strewn along with hillside along a hillside with a locomotive and carriage lying off the tracks. About 80 passengers were on board the train at the time of this incident. Now, Slovak Railways has said the collision happened at a point where the tracks merged into a single line. An investigation into the cause is underway. Now, breaking news on the Nobel Prize. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the 2025 Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel to Joel Mokyr, Philippe Aghion, and Peter Hovet. Now that is all for Newsroom.